That's the all right. Let's get into the rackets.
Exhausting. Okay.
Racket number one is from Time. What is this? This is still a magazine, Time magazine. Is that how that works?
Clearly, it is because we're reading from it. Yep.
So the headline, it says Time 2030. I don't even know what that means, but anyway,
maybe that's when they're gonna
retire
sunset.
the magazine. Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Time magazine, the climate real estate bubble. And then it says, is the U.S. on the verge of another financial crisis? If you read the article, it has nothing to do with a financial crisis. I have no idea.
Well, they are. They're talking about the fact that, well, let's get into the article. Yeah. And then, it is very much a huge crisis. I mean, it's talking about homes being flooded, people having to walk away from their properties. It's talking about towns and states having to buy properties because they're in flood-prone areas. And not just that, but also insurance. They're saying it's $1 billion business each year, all these flood claims. So I do think it has something to do with a financial crisis, but I guess in a different way. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to hit it from the climate crisis standpoint here.
Yep.
The bulk of the article focuses around this Anna Zimmerman, who lived at 1171 Shoreham in Charleston, South Carolina, which is fabulous town.
I've never been. It's on my bucket list. Maybe this summer.
Fantastic restaurant.
Maybe when I'm 40 and a half.
So anyways, this neighborhood that she lived in, I guess, is prone for flooding. She bought the house in 2005. Well, 2015, 10 years later, she had her first flood, took out most of her property. This was just heavy rain, and this came as a complete shock to her. No flood risk had been disclosed when Zimmerman bought the house 10 years earlier, but she was determined to turn lemons into lemonade. So she used up the insurance money to fix it up. And anyway, she was willing to stay there till retirement. It was her dream home. Then Hurricane Irma came in 2017, and it completely destroyed the house again. So she had it at this point, right? She's like, I'm moving. I'm going to leave the house. But she took an interesting approach, Nicole. Mm-hmm. She did not want to sell the property, so she got insurance money.
Right.
After Irma.
Yep.
And so she could either fix it up and move back in for a second time, which she didn't want to do that. She could have tore the property down and had a lot, or she could sell the property to like flippers, investors that wanted to take on, and then she could take that money and move on, go do something else, basically, right?
Right.
But she did not want to sell it because she thought it was unethical to sell that property. And this is where this is where I got completely lost on this whole entire thing, because Time Magazine's talking to a homeowner. There's no real estate professionals included in this article.
Right.
Where it's like, and I don't know who was educating, poor Anna here, who like went through all this stuff. Like, you can sell it to an investor and disclose this is exactly right. She's complaining about no disclosure when she bought it. Well,
I think she's worried that the flipper wouldn't disclose it to the next buyer that there was. But I'll be honest.
Okay, but you can't control other people down the line. You disclose to the flipper. You CYA.
Right. Well,
here's
to be
what's
quite
going
honest,
on.
Anybody trying to get homeowners insurance after 2 flood losses, I can't even imagine what that policy would look like.
Yeah, there's plenty of disclosure that can go around here, and you can basically, cover yourself.
What's super interesting, though, as you read on, is that she ended up foreclosing.
That's my point.
And now it's on the market because it was fixed up and flipped anyway. Yeah.
And so now it's on the market with Fannie Mae, and supposedly Fannie Mae is not disclosing.
Well, because they don't have to.
Right. Exactly. Because it's now bank-owned property. They're not disclosing. She had left messages on the walls. My point about this is there's a huge racket going on because there's more to the story than Time Magazine. Time Magazine is painting out Anna to be this like hero of, disclosure. And I don't believe that for a second. She would have never gone into foreclosure having all these other options. She literally had, according to this article, she literally had a flipper who sent her a written offer and kept following up like, I want to buy the property. I understand about the flooding. Here's an offer. I want to buy the property. And she was like, I was going to have too much liability selling it to this person. No, you won't. No, you won't. You disclose and you sell the property and you move on. Now you went into foreclosure. There's a missing link here. I don't know what it is, but something's missing.
I feel like that was really only one paragraph of the article.
And it kind of got me wound up.
It clearly, because there's so much more meat to this. That's just,
yes, and I agree. So let's get into the
that
meat.
was just a paragraph.
That paragraph just was a complete racket. I just want to say that. All right, let's get into the meat.
Yeah.
Annual flood days in the city increased 750% from 1980 to 2020. That's according to data from the National Weather Service. There's telltale signs all over. In wealthier neighborhoods in the area, historic homes are being elevated at costs that can run several $100,000. We know that, living in Shoreline, Connecticut, like it costs a lot of money to raise homes. That really wasn't an option for. I guess it was an option for her in her neighborhood, maybe not with budget and all these different kind of things. Her home is only worth right now. Fannie Mae has it on the market for $200,000. They had it on for $210,000. They just reduced it to $199,900. So 750% increase. Charleston, we know, is in a big time flood zone. I mean, people, you don't need much disclosure to figure that out. They've got a little chart here too. The change in average annual property loss related to flood damage from 2020 to 2050. So this is like projecting into the future, like what the change in lost dollars are going to be. If you hit the link, we're going to link this up as we always do. You can kind of scroll and hover above these counties in Charleston or these areas, and it'll show you what the projected loss is in U.S. dollars, which the U.S. dollar is losing itself anyways. We'll flash that on the screen here too if you don't want to go through the article. But what really stuck out to you, Nicole?
Well, again, if you keep going on through the article, it talks about down here, they did a nonprofit research group that studied flood risk, estimates that flooding alone already results in $20 billion in property loss annually, and that this figure will only grow to more than $30 billion in 30 years. So it's interesting because you sent me this article, and I'm a NBC Today Show watcher, and they actually were interviewing a family from Texas that, again, same thing happened. I think it was maybe 3 years ago. The floods came through Texas, or not long ago, and they lost their house.
Last year, right?
Maybe it was a year and a half ago.
Yep.
And then they finally got their house fixed back up, and then this past winter with those freezing weather that came through, and they lost pretty much everything again because all of their pipes froze. So it's very interesting. I mean, coastline, weather changing patterns. It'll be interesting to see what continues to happen. And again, I think that this is why this article is titled the financial crisis, because this is a lot of money. I know you're not an Anna fan, but that is a crisis for her. That's a huge financial crisis.
I'm not saying I'm not a fan. I'm not saying I'm not a fan of Anna. I'm saying something is missing. She had every opportunity to not go into foreclosure. She could have sold it to an investor who was begging her for the property. And she maybe she just got really bad advice. Maybe I'm not a fan of her attorney who said she was going to be on the book for liability.
But
That's not true.
We're also assuming, so she bought in 2005. So we're also assuming that she wasn't underwater, because if she did sell to an investor at 150, she would still have to come to the table with 50. It probably did make a lot more sense for her just to say goodbye to the house.
She got the insurance money. She could have gotten out of this thing clean.
Potentially, but you're also assuming that she didn't buy a car, or like there's so many other things that she could have just been doing. I don't know. I'm just saying things happen. I'd like to think that foreclosure was. I'd like to think that foreclosure was her worst case scenario. And
so then write that.
Yes,
things do
I'm
happen.
with you.
I get you. Write that, but don't paint her
Yeah.
out to be some saint here. That she her moral high ground was so ridiculously high
Well,
that's
I'm
why she went into foreclosure as opposed to
Right.
saving herself financially here. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
I'm just surprised though too that if there are mortgages involved, that ping, you need flood insurance. I mean, there's homes that are $9 million, they're in the sky, and the insurance or the mortgage company is telling them that they need flood. So I'm actually a little bit surprised that if there wasn't any disclosure from the prior owner, that at least the mortgage company was, because FEMA's all over it. I mean, FEMA's constantly remapping. I mean, it's happening.
And where they get into, I guess, to the financial crisis part is experts see a collective threat to the U.S. economy because the risks of owning a home in places affected by climate change stack up, and economists and policymakers say climate-induced flight from these threatened areas could shock the U.S. economy, where home prices would plummet there, and lending would dry up, and that local tax base would diminish as people flee and
right.
in these regions.
Yeah.
So,
well, it sounds like her neighbor, the town, actually did buy the lot next door just to remediate the risk. So
yeah,
it's
and
a
there
real
was,
thing.
it was interesting. Yeah, the town bought the one next door and they raised it.
Right.
So the town bought the property in the neighborhood, the neighboring property, and then raised it up. So she had tried to sell. I guess, when they were trying to make her out to be a saint, she tried to go sell it to the government, failed there. But again, had plenty of opportunities to sell the property and just didn't take them. Here we go. Zimmerman was honest from the beginning. She told him, the investor here, that it had flooded multiple times, citing an estimate from a structural engineer that it would cost. So you disclosed. Go ahead and sell it. The person replied, "I'm still interested," right? So, you fully disclosed. That person said, "I'm completely interested." She had 90 pages of text messages and emails that she shared with Time. That's where something is missing. A lot of times you read these articles, they're selectively editing to make their story. I just don't know what's missing from here, but. Total racket, in my opinion. They also have the map of Houston. So if you're interested in Houston's change in average annual property loss related to flood damage from 2020 to 2050. So, and was the NBC one, was that Houston, or where was that in Texas? Probably Houston, right?
I'm assuming, yeah, I think that's where, obviously the whole power grid went down in a lot of Texas, but no, I do believe that the family was in Houston, yes.
Yeah, they're talking about Hurricane Harvey, which I believe is probably the same one.
Right.
But here's what's interesting. Data from Houston Association of Realtors, which we've talked about on the show in the past, show that instead of driving people away, sales surged in the months following Harvey. So, they don't understand why people want to continue to buy in these areas. I understand why. People love living by the shore. People love living in areas like Houston. Like,
they want a beach, and they want, yes.
They're willing to take on the risk in the future. I think they even went on to say, I'll have to find it, but they're like, are people just not informed, or are people... they almost call people stupid.
People are informed. So we have a client that has a house down in the Keys, which I happened to stay at this past week.
Yes, you did.
And it got destroyed.
You're gonna be talking about this for the rest of your life.
Forever.
Till you're 50.
It got 40 and a half, because the next trip is then. So it got destroyed during the hurricane.
Where's the next trip?
I don't know. Remember we said Charleston at 4. Were you listening? I'm going to go there for 40 and a half.
Yeah.
So it was destroyed during, I don't even know what hurricane. I don't track them, but he rebuilt, and he doesn't he doesn't even have flood insurance on it anymore, because the flood insurance company couldn't even give him enough to fix it. So now he's like, forget the flood policy. Like, I don't even need it. I'll just keep spending the cash if I need to fix it. So, but it's a great spot. He's able to generate some income from it, because he could, Airbnb it. If there's enough of an upside, and it's sort of like we always tell our homeowners to save, 1%, 1 to 2% just for maintenance. So I think if you're able to sort of stockpile a little bit, so if some emergency does come up, I don't know. I don't think they're stupid. I don't think they're uninformed, because these things are physically happening to them. But I agree with you. I think that people still, regardless, want to live there and are willing to take on the risk.
Yeah, it says, homes are destroyed, but buyers are undeterred, whether because of the influence of home flippers, a lack of reliable information about a home's risk. In this situation, Zimmerman told the person the risk,
right,
or simple carelessness. So Time is basically calling people stupid that continue to buy in these areas. Yeah. Okay.
All right. You feel good about that one?
I thought the majority, there's a lot of great information in this article.
There is a lot of great information.
Especially if you sell property in an area that's, like we do, that are, multiple flood zones in the areas that we sell. I'd encourage you to read it. There's a whole bunch of information. It gets into, some of the ambitions from the Biden administration. There's a lot of good stuff in here. There's also a lot of racketeering by Time.